But we can talk about, as we're doing right now, the US election and the French election. The second round of the parliamentary elections in France take place on Sunday. But what is going to happen? Will we see the hard left, Marine Le Pen's party, National Rally, will we see them going into office with her, well, I suppose her protege, Jordan Bardella, in office as Prime Minister? Well, let's talk about all of this with Stephen Wolfe. He's a former MEP. He's also director at the Centre for Migration and Economic Prosperity. Good morning to you.
Hi, good morning, Julia.
Thanks for joining us. Now, you've been following this very, very closely, and we spoke to you, I remember, immediately after the European parliamentary elections across the whole of the EU, which, of course, sparked this snap election. We thought we were having a snap election, very snap election, being called by Emmanuel Macron in France. And this was, many people thought, his way of saying, like, well, OK, you want to vote for this party, this Le Pen party, this National Rally party, that's fine in European elections, but will you do it in national parliamentary elections? And certainly in the first round, it turned out they would. What do you think is going to happen on Sunday?
I think we're going to see the establishment in France, which is very, very strong. We call it in the UK strong, but in France it's even stronger, have come together to try and prevent Marine Le Pen's National Party gaining the power of a total majority, which was within their grasp. But when you look at the fact that you have now over 238 candidates who are in third place across the country, and bearing in mind that for most people, they don't understand that second round in France now puts Marine Le Pen's party and Jordan Bardella's party against either Macron's or the left-wing party. And so what happens, they've withdrawn 238 candidates, so there's a one-on-one situation. And so you have...
Because basically, if you've got, I think, more than 12.5% of the vote, you're entitled to stand in the second round. But a load of those candidates have said, no, we'll merely just one opposition candidate to the National Rally. That's
exactly. And the New Popular Front is, by many, they're regarded as Corbynistas or extreme left.
Well, they are hard left. I mean, everyone thinks they're radical. They're not radical, they're hard. Talk about the hard right. They are hard left.
Yeah, and here you have people like Macron and the Prime Minister's, current Prime Minister Attal in France saying that we're going to support this radical party. That's like turning Nick Clegg saying...
OK, no, OK, I really... Say, Stephen Wolfe,
sorry, I was talking
nothing,
about...
No, I don't... Nothing related to any British politics at all. Please, we're on election day. You were already warned about this. Every guest has to be warned about this. Please don't get us in any trouble. No, we don't need the comparisons. We understand. But this is the thing. We're going to go from one baby-faced Prime Minister appointed by Emmanuel Macron, very likely, to Jordan Bardella, another baby-faced Prime Minister to 28, because he's the leader of the parliamentary grouping, isn't he? Marine Le Pen still holding out to be president. She wants to run in a couple of years' time. Emmanuel Macron, of course, can't serve a third term. He's already served 2 terms. This is the thing. We've done lots of different voting systems around Europe, and we've got different PR. This second round system, it does allow people to vote for, if they don't get their preferred first candidate, to vote for a candidate who's their sort of least worst candidate. But big question still remains is how the French people are going to decide this Sunday. Will they say, look, I'll vote for anyone who isn't Marine Le Pen if they're one of the sort of 60-odd% of people who didn't vote for her party's first time round? Or will they say, actually, I don't want to vote for the hard left either? I mean, but we certainly see the party that has really been, well, grouping that's really been hit has been the sort of Macron, centrist dads, for want of a better expression.
Well, I hardly call them centrist dads, but I think to the extent is that Marine Le Pen is going to certainly win the vast majority of seats. I don't believe that she'll actually get the majority, because the way that the French system has been set up is to enable either those who do not really want to vote anymore for someone who's on hard left, unbowed, or the front, and decide that they want to support Marine Le Pen's party, will be outweighed by those in other parties. And I think that kind of coalition organisation is quite strong in France. It's worked before. But my point that I'm trying to raise with many people is that the headliners are really saying, look at Marine Le Pen, Jordan Bardella, they're far right, they're extremists. And they said exactly the same about Meloni, the first female Prime Minister of Italy. And now they're rolling back and going, actually, Meloni's ruling quite well. She's just acting like a conservative. She wants to decrease taxes. She's done so in such a way that 2,000 millionaires are now paying 100,000 a year to be there. She's encouraged growth in the stock market. You see that lots of people are coming as tourists. She's expanded infrastructure. She's not borrowing in the same way.
But also, crucially, her party was one of the few parties in power in her country in Europe during the European elections that didn't see a massive, big sort of reaction from voters voting for the alternatives for for alternative parties. So she's clearly doing something the voters of Italy like. But talk us through some of the policies of National Rally, because look, there's no doubt at all that Marine Le Pen comes from a family of blatant fascists. Jean-Marie Le Pen's views were beyond the pale, in my view. She has expressed some very questionable views. Some of the people in her old party, Front National, I would say clearly a far-right party. But every time she's run for the presidency, her father before her, she has gained more and more and more and more votes. And again, French people just saying, but the centre ground are not dealing with the issues we want dealt with. Particularly the immigration issue in France, a huge, big issue, crime and things like that, and as well as the cost of living. But in terms of the parties of her new creation, the National Rally, what are their policies that are being described as hard right?
Well, the only policy that they're looking as hard right is that on immigration. I mean, and that's seemingly the European definition of what is hard right. Marine Le Pen has made it very clear that what she wants to do is a number of things: increase the number of police and armed forces to try and prevent people from coming into France in the first place, to argue very strongly with the European Union that the borders should be closed, and that, as a consequence of that, use them to deport those who've come illegally into France. Now, that's a big no-no to the European Union. But really, when you look at other policies, she's been very clear that she wants to retain the pension rights of French citizens, particularly those in the civil service, to get effectively anything from 2/3 to a full
but also from the age of 60 for many. I mean, again, something that's utterly unaffordable in any Western nation.
Absolutely. But you imagine how many people in this country would love to have the pensions that they've got in France.
Yeah.
And
the lunch breaks. I always laugh about this, but one of the few things I thought Macron did that was sensible was raising the pension age, and people were out on the streets complaining about it. But this is it. This discussion, when people talk about politics, certainly in Europe, about hard right, far right, these terms that are thrown around, a lot of people would say these are policies which would have been considered very pretty centre ground just a few years ago. And of course, Marine Le Pen, she was very much a Eurosceptic. They had that very strong, anti-EU line for a long time, and then of course that wasn't playing as well with a rather more Europhile France at the time, and so they've now moved away from that. But there's a lot of talk about they wouldn't try and leave or have a referendum on leaving the EU, but they would certainly be standing up to the EU on issues like borders, like net zero and the taxes and things. So perhaps being rather troublesome within. And given that Macron likes to think of himself as the leader of the EU now, rather more so than Ursula von der Leyen, that's going to be very interesting to watch.
Absolutely. And you put that nail on the head, because, again, Marine Le Pen has reached out to Meloni to form a very large group in the European Parliament that would be a significant player in influencing some of those big decisions going through the Council of Ministers and also the other parts of the European Union. But one very clear thing she's said is that she wants to borrow more money in order to be able to invest in infrastructure and support some of the key civil service areas that she thinks are important, like health. Now, that's a policy that's been adopted by many of those who call themselves liberals across the United States, for example. That's type of policy.
It is really going to be fascinating to watch. We're going to obviously be talking about this on Monday morning after we get those results. Stephen Wolfe, great to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed, Director at the Centre for Migration and Economic Prosperity.